Princess Charlotte secretly signals guard who breaks royal rules without hesitation. The day didn't start like history was about to be made. No one woke up thinking a 10-year-old girl in a powder blue coat would break centuries of royal routine just by raising her hand. But that's exactly what happened outside Buckingham Palace when Princess Charlotte did something no royal child had ever done. She gave the signal. It was one of those postcard afternoons in London, the kind where the air is just cool enough to feel crisp and the sunlight hits the palace stone so perfectly you'd swear it was staged. Tourists were packed 3 deep at the gates. You had German families with fancy cameras, American moms waving guidebooks, even a Japanese tour group camped in prime position for the changing of the guard. Phones were up, smiles were out, and no one, not a single soul, had a clue about what was about to go down. Except maybe one man, Guardsman Edward Hail. Now, most people don't think twice about the royal guards. They're just background noise. Tall guys in red with giant black hats who don't flinch, blink, or budge. They're part of the show. Tradition. But Hale wasn't built for show. His mind was still wired for war zones, not ceremonies. 2 tours in Afghanistan had taught him to spot trouble before it even had a name. And today, something was wrong. It started small, a twitch in the air, 2 men near the edge of the crowd, ordinary on the surface, tourist clothes, camera straps, even pamphlets, but their eyes weren't following the guards. They were watching the crowd, measuring gaps, noting exits. One passed a folded paper with writing on it, definitely not a map. Hale's spine straightened, his fingers tightened on his rifle. He didn't blink. He just watched. Charlotte stood maybe 15 feet away, behind a polished chain barrier in the reserved section. Her coat was perfect, her shoes gleamed. She wasn't giggling or fidgeting like most kids her age. She was studying, watching the guards. You could tell she saw the ceremony as something serious, something she was a part of, not just watching. She didn't even notice the 2 men until it was too late. One of them moved first, subtle, calculated. He brushed past Charlotte's governess, mumbled an apology, and maneuvered her just enough to block Charlotte's line of sight from the rest of the courtyard. The other man, taller, sharper, closed the final few feet and leaned down like he was whispering to a niece. But Charlotte's body language changed instantly. Her spine went rigid. Her hands froze. He had a blade, tucked and pressed just beneath her coat. Nothing dramatic, just quiet, controlled threat. And here's where the story takes a hard left. Charlotte didn't panic, didn't scream, didn't even flinch. She remembered what they taught her. She remembered the one thing you do when you're in danger and can't speak. You make the signal. It looks like a wave at first. Hand up, thumb tucked in, then fingers fold over it like a cage. Simple, silent, universal. Every British kid knows it. Most adults forget it, but Charlotte didn't. She made the sign, and Hale saw it. That was it. That tiny motion shattered 362 years of royal protocol. Guards don't move. That's the rule. They don't break formation, they don't react, they don't protect. Not unless someone else gives the order. But Hale didn't wait. He didn't think, he just moved. The sound of his boots cracking against the stone was louder than any drumbeat. Cameras turned, heads snapped around. The guard was moving, and everything changed. Tourists froze. Phones tilted wildly, capturing a blur of red, charging through the historic courtyard. Hale's face was unreadable, locked in that combat state focus, his rifle no longer ceremonial but precise and deadly in his hands. Every step cut the distance between him and the girl who just used a child's gesture to shatter centuries of stillness. The taller man holding Charlotte didn't run. He pivoted. Calm, trained, his hand dug deeper beneath his jacket, searching for leverage as he twisted his body between the guard and the child. "Keep moving," he hissed at her, trying to shuffle her toward the open gate, where a black car now idled with its back door cracked open. The other man circled around, blocking the path with fake concern and fake smiles. "Let her go," Hale barked. The command thundered louder than the band. Everything else fell away, even the music faltered, and just like that, the man's mask fell. Gone was the act. He yanked Charlotte closer, the blade now fully exposed, pressed flat against her side. "One more step," he warned, voice cold and even. "You'll be explaining this at a funeral." Hale didn't blink. He took that step anyway. What happened next looked like something out of a film, but it wasn't clean or smooth. It was raw, real, messy. Hale's left hand shot out, faster than anyone expected, grabbing the attacker's wrist in a crushing grip. The knife was still there, but so was his training. One violent twist and the man's wrist popped. The blade hit the cobblestones. Before he could scream, Hale spun him away from Charlotte and shoved her behind his own back like he was made of iron. The second man lunged. No subtlety now, just pure panic. His arms outstretched, he aimed straight for the princess. But Hale was faster. He pivoted, letting the rifle swing up with brutal force. The butt of it caught the man square in the chest, lifting him off his feet and sending him sprawling onto the stones. But this guy wasn't just some hired muscle. He rolled, fast and low, came up swinging. A fist caught Hale on the jaw, snapping his head sideways, and still Hale didn't fall. Instead, he unleashed hell, a knee into the ribs, an elbow to the neck. Years of close combat slammed into the man like a freight train. Within seconds, both attackers were on the ground, wheezing, bloodied, restrained. Charlotte was frozen in place, her hands clenched into tiny fists, eyes locked on the chaos. When Hale turned toward her, rifle lowered, she didn't flinch. She stepped forward and looked up at him like nothing else in the world mattered. "You saw me," she said, voice trembling but steady. "I saw you," he nodded, breathless, blood at the corner of his mouth. Palace security poured into the courtyard. Tactical gear, earpieces, drawn weapons, all too late. But they weren't confused. They secured the perimeter, hauled the kidnappers away, swept the area for more threats. One officer examined the phone pulled from the taller man's coat. Maps, notes, photos of Charlotte, her routine, her school, her favorite spots in the palace. It wasn't random. Hale stood still while they worked, back in that motionless posture again, except now it wasn't for show. This time, it was earned. His heart was still racing, knuckles still raw. He glanced once more at Charlotte, who hadn't moved. She didn't cry. She didn't break down. She just stood there, looking at him like she understood exactly what had just happened and what it had cost. Inside the palace, the silence felt heavier than stone. A thick carpet muted every step, and the old portraits lining the walls watched without judgment. Hale stood in front of a polished oak door, bearskin hat tucked under his arm, the crease of dry blood still visible on his face. His uniform was torn at the sleeve, his lips split open, but his posture was flawless, the kind only a lifetime of discipline could hold in place. Major Harwood studied him from across the room, arms crossed. Beside him, a man in plain clothes flipped through a worn leather notebook, eyes narrowed. "Guardsman Edward Hail," the major said evenly. "Do you understand the seriousness of what you did today?" "Yes, sir," Hale replied without hesitation. "Breaking formation, abandoning your post, engaging armed individuals without command approval." "Yes, sir. And why?" the plainclothes man asked. "She gave the signal," Hale said simply, the distress gesture. Open palm, thumb tucked, fingers closed. "She looked directly at me when she made it. That's not random. That's a cry for help." The man stopped writing. Harwood didn't speak for a long moment. The only sound was the tick of an old grandfather clock in the corner. Finally, the door opened again. Charlotte walked in, coat buttoned neatly, chin held high. Her hands were folded in front of her, and behind her followed her governess and two security officers. She glanced once at Harwood, then at Hale. "I made the signal," she said, "just like they taught us. I was told if I ever needed help and couldn't speak, to do that. I did it, and he came. Nobody interrupted her. Nobody dared. I think that's what a guard is supposed to do," she added, her voice calm but firm. "Protect." The man with the notebook cleared his throat. "Well, that answers the authorization question." Harwood raised an eyebrow. "Indeed. Though we've never had protocol for this situation, it appears precedent has just been rewritten." Charlotte stepped forward, reached into her coat pocket, and handed something to Hale. A folded piece of paper, slightly crinkled at the edges. He opened it carefully. It was a drawing. A child's drawing, done in pencil and colored in carefully. It showed a guardsman standing tall and red, shielding a small girl in a blue coat. The girl's hand was raised in that same signal. Underneath, in neat handwriting, "Thank you for seeing me." Hale swallowed hard, his fingers tightened on the paper. "Thank you, Your Highness." "No, Charlotte said softly. Thank you. That evening, after the ceremony resumed and the palace gates were closed again, Guardsman Edward Hail returned to his quarters. He pinned the drawing to the wall above his bed, right next to old medals, photos from Helmand province, and letters from home. This one meant more than all of them. He didn't say much to the others in the barracks that night, but when he walked through, every guard he passed stood a little taller. Not a single man questioned the choice he'd made. A week later, Charlotte attended another public event. The tourists were back. The brass gleamed, the drums thundered. Hail was back at his post, tall, unmoving, silent. From the crowd, he looked like a statue again. But Charlotte knew better. She looked up at him, hand over her heart. Not the distress signal, something else. A silent thank you. Recognition. Respect. Hail didn't move, but his eyes met hers. Just for a moment. And that moment said everything.